Da una parte la sua vita umana diventa una storia dalla quale tutti i suoi devoti, tutti coloro che cercano illuminazione da questo maestro possano trarre ispirazione per una vita. When a great master leaves his body, this is an important moment for the whole of humanity. On the one hand, his life then becomes a history, becomes a story from which all sincere seekers can draw inspiration for a lifetime. E dall'altra parte lui diventa di nuovo onnipresente. And on the other hand, he also becomes again omnipresent. E i veri discepoli più profondi sono quelli che continuano a cercare ogni giorno, con ogni meditazione, a sentire la sua presenza e la sua guida nel proprio cuore e qui nel punto tra le sopracciglia. And his deepest followers, his deepest disciples are those who focus on that omnipresence and who try every day with every sadhana, with every service, to continue to feel that presence in their hearts and here at the spiritual eye. Ecco perché vogliamo commemorare il grande Mahasamadhi di Swami Sri Yukteswar e anche ancora di Yogananda, che è stata l'altra 2 giorni fa. And that is why we this evening want to commemorate with you the Mahasamadhi of the great Swami Sri Yukteswar, and of course also of our Guru Paramahansa Yogananda, who left his body 2 days, whose Mahasamadhi was 2 days earlier, on March the 7th. Ci saranno relatori in italiano e in inglese, ci sarà musica e alla fine ci sarà un arati. Vi vorrei incoraggiare di mettervi in sintonia con il maestro attraverso quello che queste condivisioni. There will be speakers, 4 speakers, who will be sharing stories. There will be music, and at the end there will be a short, simple ceremony. And we encourage you to meditate with us the whole evening, to stay tuned to the presence of the great master. Allora, buona serata, possa Swami Sri Yukteswar benedirvi stasera, ispirarvi con la sua saggezza, con la sua luce, stasera e per tutto il resto della vostra vita. So we wish you a blissful, joyful evening, and may Swami Sri Yukteswar, the great master, bless you tonight and for the rest of your life. Namaste. Good evening, everybody. In just a few days, we find ourselves both Mahasamadhis of Yogananda and of Swami Sri Yukteswar. This is not the only opportunity in which we hear these 2 names together. It's not only when it's Mahasamadhi, but we always celebrate the very fact that they did incarnate. And so, amongst many things, Yogananda has also become famous for being the most important disciple of Swami Sri Yukteswar. And Swami Sri Yukteswar became important because he was the master of Yogananda. And so their relationship is unique and important. And when you compare their 2 personalities, if this humanity may have a sense, then when you put them together, both masters, it's always to demonstrate the affinity, the work that needs to be done for self-realization, their desire to help humanity to flow and to grow. But very often they are also put together to show the big differences characteristics, strong characteristics, and very different in personality between these two men. Both had the task to create saints and to help people, help humanity to transcend the primary mud, but they had very different personalities. You know that Yogananda has been called Premavatar, which means incarnation of divine love, whereas Sri Yukteswar has been named a Jnanavatar, incarnation of wisdom. The ways and the characteristics of Yogananda, therefore, were much more oriented towards compassion, support. To an example for everyone, I'm thinking of the disciple who felt a little bit humiliated, and Yogananda said, "Forgive me, Mother, forgive me, Master, if I can't be the disciple I would like to be. I can't just be at the level you want me to be." And Yogananda looked at him full of compassion and said, "What else could I do but forgive you?" So he was really an incarnation of divine love, the best expression of devotion and of pure love and unconditional love. Sri Yukteswar was without compromise, but to speak also in a more funny way about their characteristics. I would like to read something from the autobiography of a yogi, where in the ashram of Sri Yukteswar, there was a scientist who came there, and this is how Yogananda describes it. One time, a famous chemist started to argue with Sri Yukteswar. He said that God doesn't exist because the science cannot prove his presence. Sri Yukteswar looked at him with a severe glance and said, "So you fail to unexplainably to isolate the supreme power in your test tubes? I recommend another experiment. For 24 hours, examine your own thoughts without ever stopping, and I will assure you that you will no longer wonder why God stays absent." So these were his ways, his characteristics, how Sri Yukteswar worked with people. Yogananda said that the definition, the Vedic definition, that would fit to Sri Yukteswar's. He said, sweeter than the flower when kindness was concerned, but more stronger than thunder when the principles were concerned. And a story about him that really struck me, that I consider, which is the story of the jeweler and the goldsmith. Yogananda came back to India after 15 years in America, and Sri Yukteswar says to Yogananda, "I heard that in America you're teaching, that you're turning spirituality into business, and that we can, but that's not exactly what I've taught you, to make spirituality into a business." And so Yogananda, who went to the West to bring the teachings of India to the West, he knew that he had to find the right methodology to bring these teachings to the West. So Yogananda, with great humility and respect, said to Sri Yukteswar, more or less he said this. He said, with all due respect, sir, you are a goldsmith and you only work the gold. I am the jeweler and I have to use the material that you make and sell it. And Sri Yukteswar then seemed to be satisfied with that answer. When you speak about Sri Yukteswar, it's also easy to associate him with astrology. He often is associated with astrology. He had wisdom, but he also had deep, deep knowledge in many different fields. He knew astronomy, medicine, and especially he was known as a great astrologer. He knew astrology really well. There is a beautiful chapter in Autobiography Yoga which is called Outwitting the Star, where Sri Yukteswar explains to Yogananda what astrology really means and how it works. And in that chapter he explains also why astrology should be rehabilitated as a science. It had as a venerable age, and now because of charlatans it has become discredited. So when you speak about in astrological circles, you speak about astrology, you can easily think of Sri Yukteswar, the way his personality, his wisdom, with the characteristics of and the vibrations of the planet Saturn. And Yogananda can be easily satisfied with his love and devotion with the characteristics of the planet Jupiter. This is one way of explaining what these different influences are. So those who are interested in astrology, who know more about the transits right now, what's happening now, maybe you've heard about it, in this great conjunction with Saturn and Jupiter that's happening. It started in December of last year, and it feels like this influence of these two planets, especially the planet Saturn, over the past months, and it will go on for the rest of the year, that it has for us some important lessons to learn and to realize something very important that we're all experimenting. So when we try to understand the influence of Saturn, that's one way is maybe to meditate and attune ourselves to the vibration of Swami Sri Yukteswar. With his, what was the real purpose of his behavior and his way of teaching. So I would like to read another episode in 1936 where Yogananda visited his guru again, because this great conjunction of planets, of Jupiter and Saturn, is happening right now within the constellation of Capricorn, which is governed by Saturn. So it's as if this moment, these months, Saturn is in his own house, in a privileged and comfortable position, whereas Jupiter is in a position of debilitation, of weakness, and becomes almost invisible. So I would like to read this beautiful episode from the autobiography of this short dialogue between Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar in 1936, when Yogananda came back and spends time with his guru Yogananda at a certain point says, "Master, I ask you, please allow me to buy you a new carpet for your lounge." He had noted that I had noted that the carpet had worn out, was badly worn out. "You can do that if you like," the Master Sri Yukteswar said. His tone was everything but enthusiastic. My tiger skin is clean and neat, and I'm happy, and I'm a sovereign in my little kingdom. Out there is the cold world, interested only in externals. So these are vibrations for us right now that are a little bit difficult to understand. They seem rigid and austere, but Sri Yukteswar has explained to us also. He explained to us more about this modality in the autobiography of a yogi, when he writes about his experiences with his years in his master's hermitage. Yogananda tells this. The master was not very popular amongst superficial seekers. But a few, those who stayed, were at a deep reverence for him, and there were a small number, of course. I could say that he would have been the most sought-after guru of India, had it not been for his brusque and austere discipline. Sri Yukteswar said, "I am hard with those who come to me, for learning, for training. That is my way. You can take it or leave it. I will never compromise. Your ways," he said to Yogananda, will be much more tender with your disciples. That is your way of being. I try to purify people in the flames of wisdom, cauterizing, which is beyond the way many people can handle. I try to purify in the flames of severity in a way that is too much for most people. But also the kind and loving touch and the flexibility also are efficient and help. And that is your way. Yogananda then says, students came often, and they came and went. Those who wanted a little bit the comprehension and they wanted compliments, they didn't find it in Sri Yukteswar's ashram. The master offered shelter for the ages, but many disciples also wanted a balsam for their ego, and then they left, preferring the world's countless humiliations to humility before the Guru. The shining rays, the cauterizing rays, the sun rays of his wisdom were too powerful for their spiritual sickness, and so they sought lesser teachers who would give them space to also stay in their ignorance, and their ego. So when we think of the influence of Saturn, then when we think of it as negative, and we think of the situation right now that is happening now, where we seem to be under the influence of a very strong Saturn, we also think that he's trying to purify us, and he's trying to purify us beyond the capacities of many people to endure. But the effect will be expansion of consciousness. In the holy science, Sri Yukteswar says, when you arrive at a great spiritual strength, you can eliminate all the obstacles on the road towards wisdom. What are these obstacles? Well, he lists them. He says hatred, shame, fear, pain, grief, judgment, racial prejudice, pride of prejudice, smugness. He calls those the 8 meannesses of the heart. And therefore, if you want to purify the heart, then love comes. And then Sri Yukteswar is no longer severe for us. The great fear that we have of Saturn is that it will destroy our attachments to the world, and that we don't know if we have the power to face that. Saturn is showing us the limitation in our lives, our mental images that we need to eliminate, and that we need if we want to find the way towards wisdom.
I've passed my life as a stranger, Lord, roamed far in foreign lands, far, Lord, far too far. Only he who knows he's far from home, only he, Lord, understands. Only he who knows he's far from home feels the earth and understands. Sometimes a stranger did take me in, then love I thought was near. Love, Lord, where is love? As the winds upon the desert sand whisper hope, then disappear. As soft winds breathe on the desert sand, so love sighs, then disappears. Sometimes a child laughed and I did pause, and dreamed of joys at home. Joys, Lord, only a dream. For what joy is there without your smile? Empty like the ocean foam. For what joy is there without your smile? You're the sea, all else is foam. How long must I be a wanderer, Lord? You know where I belong. You know, Lord, yes, you know. Home is where my Lord's sweet presence is. I've grown tired of strangers' songs. Home is where my Lord's sweet presence is. Bless me that I hear your songs.
Buonasera a tutti. Spero che avete una bellissima
I'm going to
sera.
speak a little bit about, a little bit about my thoughts and feelings and a little bit of experience with 𝗬𝗘𝗟𝗓. And it's a very nice topic to talk about because what I have heard from not everybody but many people, especially when I lived in India, is that they were a little bit scared of him. Like he was almost like the mean one, the one who criticizes, it's too severe, he's going to smack me, and all these things. And it's a shame because there's a little bit of a misconception there. So what I'm going to do briefly is I'm going to take it from a different angle. I'm going to read some passages from the autobiography of a yogi and then do a little comment on each one of them to try to disprove this myth that nobody can relate to poor 𝗬𝗘𝗟𝗓. So this first one is at the very beginning of chapter 14. And actually I need to tell the story first, which is after Master has spent 6 months at his guru's ashram, one day he decided, I'm too impatient. He didn't tell this to himself, but that's what he describes later was the case with all these ashram duties and everything. I'm here to find God, so let me go to the Himalayas and find another master that will give me the experience of God. So he went to 𝗬𝗘𝗟𝗓, he said, I'm going. 𝗬𝗘𝗟𝗓 said, well, you're not going to find God in a mountain. I am your guru. And Master was a little deaf to this at the moment, and he went and left. And when there's this whole story about the sleepless saint afterwards, but something interesting is that if you read the book, you think Master was gone only for a few days. But what I learned afterwards is that he was gone actually from his guru's ashram for a whole year. And chapter 14 starts when Master returns to the ashram. So he says, I am here, Guruji. My shamefacedness spoke more eloquently for me. Let us go to the kitchen and find something to eat. 𝗬𝗘𝗟𝗓's manner was as natural as if hours and not days had separated us. Master, I must have disappointed you by my abrupt departure from my duties here. I thought you might be angry with me. No, of course not. Wrath springs only from thwarted desires. I do not expect anything from others, so their actions cannot be in opposition to wishes of mine. I would not use you for my own ends. I am happy only in your own true happiness. So as you see, there's a little bit of a disconnection between this passage and the concept that 𝗬𝗘𝗟𝗓 is only there to criticize us. He was not angry, he did not complain, he did not criticize, he just accepted and moved on. Now, if you meditate, obviously Sri Yukteswar had a, let's say, difficult personality with his disciples, and that's not even the whole story. It doesn't say it so much here, but in other accounts of people who have met him, they have described him as, gentle, kind, full of joy. Children loved him as a grandfather because he was always kindly and, I guess, grandfatherly. So that does not connect with the Sri Yukteswar we know that disciplined Yogananda. And if you meditate on him, at least that has been my experience and that of others I have asked to, and even when we pray actually, because when we do the prayer, we're not only repeating the names of each guru, we're actually trying to feel their presence behind the name. And what you feel there is not criticism, it's not judgment. It's there's calmness, there's gravity. There can also be some severeness, perhaps, or not rigidity. What's the word I'm looking for? Firmness. But you're never going to feel insecure. You're never going to feel not supported. So the problem lies somewhere else, and what I have realized is that because I used to think this way myself, and people have told me, again, especially in India, it happens a lot. I don't know if it doesn't happen other places or it's just not so spoken about, but I have heard a lot that people say, I cannot look at Sri Yukteswar's picture because then I feel like I'm very conscious of all my faults. I know I made this mistake, I know I made that mistake, I know this bad habit I have, so I do not dare to face him. And I used to be this way also, and what I realized after all is that what am I afraid of? It's the judgment of the Guru, but the Guru doesn't judge. Sri Yukteswar, as we have seen just now, doesn't judge. So what we are really afraid of, I think, is the judgment of ourselves, and we're just blaming him because it's convenient. So let's not do that, and let us think also that, who are you going to hide from? To the very extent that you try to hide your faults or anything from Sri Yukteswar, you're hiding from Master, you're hiding from Jesus, from Babaji. Well, let's complete the list. Lahiri, you're hiding from God. So, if you feel that need to hide, you just have to ask yourself, what is wrong with me? And perhaps meditate on him and realize that it is not him who's not going to forgive you. It is you yourself who is not forgiving. Now, my second passage comes from the years in my master's hermitage. Now, on the other side, discipline had not been unknown to me. At home, father was strict, Ananda often severe, but Sri Yukteswar training cannot be described as other than drastic. A perfectionist, my guru was hypercritical of his disciples, whether in matters of moment or in the subtle nuances of behavior. So yes, he was very tough on his disciples. We know that. There's plenty of examples here and otherwise. But again, if we start thinking, I'm going to hide from him, or perhaps saying, I'm very lucky that fortunately I was saved because my guru is master. My teacher was Swamiji, and they were much softer. So lucky I am. But, often I ask myself this question, and I think it's a very pertinent question to ask. What if I had been there, and I had gone to Sri Yukteswar's ashram, and I had been facing this kind of discipline that he gave his disciples? Would I have been able to take it? And why is this question important? Because, the question I ask myself, the answer I give myself always is, well, I cannot know. Yes, no, perhaps, hopefully, yes. But what I say, I hope so, I hope yes, because what other option do I have? really. If we are sincere in our search for God, and if we know this Guru is doing everything he does, this Guru, everything they do is for our highest good, so that we can go reach God in the shortest possible time, by the shortest possible route. If we say no to whatever discipline they impose on us, then what does it say about us? It means that our desire for God is not complete yet. There is some little bit of insincerity, perhaps, in our wish for self-realization. So, I cannot answer that question without being there and knowing, but I can ask myself that question, and I find it very useful. Could I take it if I were there? Well, at this moment, right now, I will bring up my energy and say, yes, I will do my best. I don't try to avoid it. Yes. And the last passage I want to share. Which one is it? Yes, okay. In Master's life, I fully discovered the cleavage between spiritual realism and the obscure mysticism that spuriously passes as a counterpart. My Guru was reluctant to discuss the superphysical realms. His only marvelous aura was one of perfect simplicity. In conversation, he avoided startling references. In action, he was freely expressive. Others talked of miracles, but could manifest nothing. Sri Yukteswar seldom mentioned the subtle ways, but secretly operated them at will. So this is just a small example, but it's just a small example, but this full chapter, this is also from years at my Master's Hermitage, the full chapter is full of examples of how Sri Yukteswar's life went. There was a routine at the ashram. They got up, they walked through the Ganges, they had breakfast, had lunch, etc., etc. It was very simple, very humble, very ordinary in a way. And why I find that extremely, not only for me, extremely important for everybody, is because, we often say that Lahiri Mahashaya is the householder saint, the example we have to follow. And sure, yeah, that's also true. That's also true, but this is also a great example to follow and to keep in mind. Obviously, he was a Swami, but before he was a Swami, he was married, he had a daughter, he did all of his duties, his very ordinary worldly duties. He did them very precisely, very consciously. He never tried to escape them. He never tried to kind of cheat his way out of them. This book, again, is full of examples of that. He was practical, he was down to earth, but his head was completely in heaven. And again, why is this very important, particularly for me as a householder, is because he is an example that is very easy to be encouraged by. Let's look at our line of gurus. Sri Yukteswar was not an immortal master in the Himalayas, not in this life anyway. He was not Jesus in terms of his life spectacle, so to speak. He was not a monk-like master. He had a much more ordinary life. And Lahiri, he also had a regular life, but he had, after a while he stopped sleeping. He was all day meditating, sitting in his room, talking to his disciples. Whenever a disciple asked him for a miracle, he stopped that train. He floated, surrounded by angels for that disciple, his wife. There's all this grandeur to the life of him, that at least that from what we know from the book. Whereas Sri Yukteswar's life was very humble, and it can serve, at least for me, because my life is humble. I also am married, I have a family, I have a job, I don't have a lot of time to dedicate to openly spiritual matters, as I did when I was a monk. But then I see Sri Yukteswar, I see his life, and I see an example that I can follow, that I can tell myself, well, here I am, I'm not as involved as I would like to be. I do not meditate as much as I would like. I cannot fly, I cannot do miracles. But here is a man that lived a perfectly ordinary life on the outside, but in the inside he was a Superman, and that's something I can strive for and something I would like to be. Home.
From the depths of slumbers I ascend the spiral stairway of wakefulness. I will whisper, whisper, God, God, God. Thou art the food, and when I break my fast of nightly separation from thee, I will taste thee and mentally say, God, God, God. No matter where I go, the spotlight of my mind will ever keep turning on thee. And in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be, God, God, God. When boisterous storms of trials shriek, and when worries howl at me, I will drown their noises, loudly chanting, God, God, God. When my mind weaves dreams, dreams, with threads of memories, on that magic cloth will I emboss, God, God, God. Every night in time of deepest sleep, when my peace dreams and calls, joy, joy, my joy comes singing evermore, God, God, God. In waking, eating, working, dreaming, sleeping, meditating, chanting, divinely loving, my soul will constantly hum, unheard by any. God, 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 God.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to share a story about Yogananda and 𝗟𝗓𝗟, about their previous lives, taking you back to a distant past. Yogananda said, when he lived, he said to certain disciples that he had been William the Conqueror in a past life. And when he said, a few people were very surprised, because as Yogananda said, because history is often distorted as it is taught in the schools. And Yogananda, in his autobiography, he says, it's not the first sun in which I bowed at the feet of my guru. And in fact, in the life of William the Conqueror, 𝗟𝗓𝗟𝗏 was there as well. And let's look at this past history of these two great masters. We're talking about the year 1000, around the year 1000. A difficult period in history and very hard, very tough. A period of tamas, barbarians, rough. And so incarnating in that period, in that place, in that difficult period, was not a simple undertaking, even though they were already fully realized masters. And so let's talk about this story then. Let's tell this story. 𝗟𝗓𝗟𝗏 his name was then Lanfranco, and he was Italian, believe it or not. He was born in Pavia, and so he was born into a very well-read, erudite family. They were a family of lawyers, of intellectuals. So he had a strong intellectual inclination, as he also had a very clear, transparent mind, and he was that already in the life as Lanfranc. So at a certain point, he travels by chance. He decides to go to Normandy. He wanted to perform more introspection, also for his personal reasons. He traveled, and as he was walking, as he was starting to travel, he met dangerous criminals who were about to kill him. Inwardly, Lanfranc said, if I survive this, I will become a monk. And so he did survive, and he became a monk. And then he became the prior of the monastery of Lebec in Normandy. And so he led a monastic life. He was part of the Benedictine brothers order. And in Normandy then, there was the Duke of Normandy. He was the Duke of Normandy, William the Conqueror. Lanfranc had criticized William for his marriage, his wedding with Matilda, and because they said that was his cousin, so Lanfranc had expressed a certain judgment about the decision of the Duke, and so okay, send him away. William said, send him away out of Normandy. This monk. And so the soldiers went to Lanfranc and said, "You have to go. The Duke of Normandy tells you to leave Normandy, and do so fast." So he took a horse, and the horse was lame, and so very slowly he left. By coincidence, he meets, on his way out of the country, he meets William together with a small group of followers. They were there, and they meet Lanfranc there on the road. And the knights then laugh at him because of the strange horse that was lame, and so they poked fun at him. Lanfranc stopped and again said to William exactly the same words of judgment, and William then listened as he spoke to William and to the knights, and so they started an argument together. In that period, it was who would have dared to argue with the Duke. That was a very dangerous thing to do. Socially, to go against the will of the Duke, you risked death penalty. And so William felt, they heard these answers from Lanfranc, and then he came off his horse and he went over to Lanfranc and hugged him and said, "You have such a clear mind as I've never seen in my life. And please stay in my duchy, stay in Normandy." And so this way the guru and the disciple recognized each other at that moment. In following a argument between Lanfranc and William, and Lanfranc then became his spiritual guide to the Duke of William the Conqueror, to William the Conqueror. He considered Lanfranc to be a very wise man, very deep, and also their children, to the children, they always said, follow, don't listen to everybody, but always listen to Lanfranc. He can guide you. So we see here again on a historical level, we see this aspect of Sri Yukteswar, of wisdom, of being an avatar. And this is now also being recognized then by William the Conqueror at the Netla. And so let's see now the attitude of William the Conqueror as how he related to Yogananda. So in those days, let's look at a few episodes so we can understand the greatness of William. In those days, in England, had lost their king, and there was a man, his name was Harold, and he had taken the throne, and he had enthroned himself as King of England, whereas that was William's right. He had the right of succession. And Harold had also sworn to be faithful to William. So when he knew that Harold, against his vow, had taken the throne, he started building ships and he gathered his army, and he decided to conquer England. So he had to build many, many ships. With 9,000 people, there had to be food for everyone, and then they had to cross the English Canal, and the weather wasn't very good while they were crossing, and at a certain point they couldn't see William's ship anymore. They couldn't see each other, and so his men started to be afraid. They thought that something had happened to William, that they had maybe captured by the English. And so William had seen that his army was scared. So what did he do? He said to certain people, he said, okay, deck the table where everyone can see it and serve all the food that is there. He sat down and started eating calmly, very relaxed. Everyone was panicking, but he was having his meal quietly. So that was like an episode where you can see then the depth that he had even in the midst of life storms. So this was really like a teacher. He was giving his army a lesson. He was teaching them a lesson. This is interesting, so we can see there the spirit of Yogananda. Another story is when he goes to England, and he was already king in England, and so in those days William, they were about to enter England, and William slipped. He fell, and his men thought this was a bad omen. He fell with his face in the mud. But William was, of course, a wise man, and he was very aware of every situation in his life. Then he grasped the land with both hands. He said, "I'm so determined, so enthusiastic to conquer this land that I've already decided to grasp it with my own hands." And so the army, then the soldiers then became again encouraged, and they started saying, long live William. And so he used, there was a little bit moment of low energy, and he used it to uplift that energy again. So this is very interesting. He's very good at uplifting the energy of all the people around him. Another interesting story is when they were about to fight. William put his helmet on, but he put it the other way around, upside down. And again, people were thinking, "What's happening here?" He said, "Oh God, this must be a bad omen again." But William, when he saw that, he put the helmet right again, and he said, "As I changed my helm in the right position, I will change this England and bring it on the and I will subject it to the Duchess of Normandy." And so again, you see how he managed to magnetize his army with his strength and enthusiasm and energy, and he was able to uplift the energy again of the army. When there were wars or battles, he was always up front. He wasn't back as many generals did. He was the first to leave, to encourage his soldiers. Interesting that before he started the battle, William would always pray. He didn't do anything, by the way, without first connecting with God. First he prayed, and then he fought. When he felt it was the right thing to do, nothing could stop him. He was like a tiger. He was one of the most feared warriors. No one could challenge him. He would always win. But his wisdom was really oriented towards peace. He said, "I need to use strength with this barbaric people. They will destroy themselves unless they have a king." And that year, he brought peace not only in England, he brought peace and spirituality in England, because that people who were then barbarians, and Europe without him would have been subject to great chaos, much worse than it already was in. So his military act of conquering England made all the difference also for the history of Europe itself. In fact, so after the wars in England, he didn't want to do any more wars. He sent a message saying, let's solve the problem between the two of us. Otherwise, there will be so much bloodshed. So 19,000 people on a battlefield, there would be such a slaughter. But Harold didn't accept it. He didn't want to fight with William personally. And so he said, okay, I will. He offered himself up to God, but then he found out that God was with William, or William was really with God. So we can see that kings could be barbarians, but he was spiritually wise, he was socially wise, he would create new laws, he would support new churches. He had an imprint in Europe, a spiritual imprint that in England there are still now certain laws that date back to the times of William the Conqueror. Can you imagine? So he played a very, very important role. And studying history, you can see that 𝗖𝗘𝗟𝗃 and Yogananda were always together, and they always had the same attitudes as William the Conqueror had. Thank you. Buonasera a tutti.
A danger when one is the last person to speak that others will have taken all the stories that I intended to use. Fortunately, that didn't happen this time. I'd like to speak a little bit about the relationship between 𝗖𝗘𝗟𝗃 and Paramahansa Yogananda. When I was relatively new to Ananda, I reflected a lot about the guru-discipleship relationship, the guru-disciple relationship, what I had learned, what I had heard. And a question came to my mind that I was able to ask Swami Kriyananda. If the guru-disciple relationship is eternal, if Babaji was a previous incarnation, if Krishna was a previous incarnation of Babaji, and if Arjuna was a previous incarnation of Yogananda, why is not Babaji Yogananda's guru? I thought it was a logical question. And Swamiji responded that Babaji is in truth the guru, the Sat Guru. And he asked 𝗖𝗘𝗟𝗃 to be the one to guide Yogananda, to teach him, to prepare him for his mission in America, in the West. But Yogananda related to 𝗖𝗘𝗟𝗃 as his guru. He called him Guruji. And their relationship was very complex. There were a lot of different levels to it. They related in many different ways. And we see this from their very first meeting. Remember the story when Yogananda, at that time he was Mukunda, was in the city of Benares doing an errand, and looking down the alley he saw this Christ-like sage standing there. Excuse me, I need to get my shawl because it's cold in here and I'm having difficulty not paying attention to the cold instead of what I'm trying to say. Thank you. Otherwise my teeth would start chattering. So he he recognized this man as his guru. He humbly bent and touched his feet. And remember what Sri Yukteswar said over and over again, "All my own, you have come to me. All my own, you have come to me." From the very beginning, their relationship was loving, tender, like the relationship between a father and son. Sri Yukteswar said to Yogananda, "I will give you my unconditional love. Will you give me your unconditional love?" And Yogananda said, "Yes." But then he said, "Sir, what if I should see that you are not a God-realized master?" Imagine saying this to Sri Yukteswar. What if you should fall beneath my expectations? This story comes from Swami Kriyananda, and Sri Yukteswar said, "I don't want your love, it stinks." So already we see there this two sides to the relationship. But Sri Yukteswar blessed Yogananda, he took him to show him his ashram, said, "I will give you everything. I will give you my ashram." And Mukunda said, "The only thing I want from you is God." So far everything was going fine. And then Sri Yukteswar says, "I think you should go back to your family in Calcutta, and I want you to go back to school." No, sir, I won't do that. I'm sorry. And Sri Yukteswar, of course, was very wise. He said, "Are you afraid your family will laugh at you?" Which was exactly what he was afraid of, because Ananda had predicted, his older brother, "Soon enough you'll be coming back to the family fold." "No, I will not." And Sri Yukteswar, whose ashram was very close to Calcutta, said, "You will come back to me in 30 days, and you will go back to your family." "No, sir, I won't." And that was the end of their conversation. And Mukunda, Yogananda writes that he mulled about that. He was wondering why their first meeting ended on a less than harmonious note. And as we know, he did return to Sri Yukteswar within those 30 days. After the experience that we read about in the chapter, Two Penniless Boys from Vrindavan. And he ended up returning. He ended up going to Serampore, where Sri Yukteswar was. And he came before his master, and Sri Yukteswar was quite cold. "So you have come." "Yes, master. I have come to place myself at your feet. I am here to follow you. But how can you do that when you do not do what I tell you to do?" "No longer, Guruji. From now on, your wish will be my law." "That is better. Now I can take responsibility for your life." So from that point, we have these wonderful chapters about his life with Sri Yukteswar. And as Vayu said, he had this quality being very severe, and especially with Yogananda, because he knew the importance of Yogananda's mission. He knew what Yogananda would be called upon to do. And so, as Yogananda put it, he was like a sculptor that was chiseling away all of his rough edges. It's hard to imagine Yogananda as having personality defects, but apparently he did. And Sri Yukteswar was very stern with him. He was so tuned into his disciple, as Yogananda writes, even one stray thought in his mind would cause Sri Yukteswar to stop speaking, stop his discourse, and say, "You are not with me." "No, Guruji, I have heard every word. I can tell you exactly what you said. Yes, but you were thinking about 3 buildings, one on the plain, one on a mountain, and one by the seaside. These 3 buildings will come in time. But now you are here to learn. You are here to be with me. And the young Mukunda said, what can one do with a guru like this that reads my mind like a book? And Sri Yukteswar said, I only come in to those who invite me in. And of course, Mukunda said, sir, you are always welcome. He understood, one of the only ones that understood. There was one time when one of the disciples complained about Sri Yukteswar and said, I don't understand the guru. And Mukunda said, also quite strongly, neither do you understand God. But he understood. He knew exactly what Sri Yukteswar was doing. He writes that his guru could never be bribed, even by love. He showed no leniency to one like myself, Yogananda speaking, Mukunda speaking, who willingly offered to be his disciple. His discipline was severe, but it was necessary. But then he said, as we have heard from Vayu, your way will be different. You will guide with love. I love the story of when Sri Yukteswar met Yogananda's father, Bhagavati, and they were brother disciples. They were both disciples of Lahiri Mahashaya. And Bhagavati was shocked when Sri Yukteswar started to complain about Mukunda and how he was behaving badly. This was because Mukunda had tried to convert somebody that Sri Yukteswar knew wasn't right for the ashram. And when his father came to Mukunda, he said, I thought I would find you almost dying from the way that Sri Yukteswar talked about you. And Mukunda, full of righteous anger, went to his guru and said, Sir, was that correct to speak to my father like that? And then Sri Yukteswar completely disarmed him. He lowered his gaze and he said, I will not do it again. Simply that. What greatness is shown in this act of humility. Even though he was very stern, he was unfailingly just and recognized the justice of Mukunda's complaint. Now, one thing that isn't really mentioned a lot is Sri Yukteswar's sense of humor, but he was amazing in this. I love the story of the mosquitoes. You remember Mukunda would stay with Sri Yukteswar whenever he could in his ashram, and he was eaten alive by mosquitoes. And so Sri Yukteswar told him, okay, you can buy some mosquito netting, but put it around your bed and also my bed. Because otherwise the mosquitoes will, if you are protected, they'll all come to me. So one evening, bedtime was coming and Mukunda was waiting for Sri Yukteswar to tell him to put the mosquito netting up, and he didn't. So when Mukunda went to bed, he immediately started to get bitten by mosquitoes. And so he wanted to wake up Sri Yukteswar and ask him if he could put up the nets, because he didn't want to do it without permission. And this was the first time he'd seen Sri Yukteswar in this state of samadhi, breathlessness. And he saw he was there immobile, not breathing. He put a mirror in front of his mouth, and there was no fog. And then he closed the guru's nose with his fingers to see if he was really breathing or not. And then Sri Yukteswar started to laugh And he said, "Ah, a budding experimentalist, my poor nose." And then he said, "Why don't you go to bed? The whole world will not change for you. You must rid yourself of mosquito consciousness." And from that moment on, the mosquitoes didn't bother Mukunda. And he realized that the power of his guru was such that they didn't need mosquito nets to protect them. The other classic story that everyone knows is the great cauliflower robbery. And Sri Yukteswar was really playing with Mukunda. It was all set up as a joke on Mukunda. Mukunda brought him these 8 wonderful cauliflowers that he had cultivated, and Sri Yukteswar told him to put them under the bed. And then they all went out for a walk, and Sri Yukteswar said, "Did you lock the door of the ashram?" "Yes, sir, I think so." "No, you didn't. You must be punished." And then Mukunda tells of this man who was sort of crazy, waving his arms around, behaving like a crazy person, walking by the ashram, who suddenly turned around, went inside, came out with one of his cauliflowers in his hands, and they were well hidden under his bed. Sri Yukteswar had planted the thought in that man's mind to go into the ashram and take a cauliflower in order to tease Mukunda, just to joke him. And he said, I could tell that this man had a hankering for cauliflower, so I decided to give him one of yours. But the hallmark, obviously, of their relationship was a deep friendship in God. And in this, Sri Yukteswar was like a father to Mukunda. One time, Mukunda had pleased Sri Yukteswar by his loving selfless service in a solstice celebration. And Sri Yukteswar said, "I want you with me. I'm very pleased with you. You may sleep in my bed tonight," which was an enormous honor. But just as they were getting into bed, Sri Yukteswar said, "There are still some disciples who are going to arrive soon. I will go and cook for them." "Are you sure, sir? Sir, it's very late. It's almost midnight." "You must be tired. You've been working hard. You stay here and sleep. I'm going to go cook." So, of course, Mukunda could do nothing except go and cook with his guru, and they prepared food, and as soon as the food was ready, these disciples came in apologizing for their lateness, saying they had missed their train, but they could not live without seeing their master. After that, Sri Yukteswar said to Mukunda, "Because you have shown your willingness to overcome tiredness, you will never be plagued again by this tiredness. You will never feel this limitation. You have overcome this delusion." There are many other stories that are wonderful. I just wanted to move ahead now to the end of Sri Yukteswar's life. The last time that Mukunda saw his guru, and he said, "Guruji, I'm happy to see you alone because I have an important question for you. I came to you as a high school student, and now I'm a grown man, and in all these years, only once have you said, 'I love you.'" And Sri Yukteswar said, "Why do I have to express in cold words a feeling that is so deep and so profound?" And Mukunda said, "Master, my heart yearns to hear you say this. My human heart yearns for these words from you." And then Sri Yukteswar, with tears in his eyes, gazed at him and said, "Yogananda, You are the son that I always wanted. You have fulfilled all of my hopes for you. I love you always. And Yogananda writes that in that moment, a huge weight was lifted from his heart. And he knew that his master's love and his master's presence would be with him always, no matter what happened. And as we know, even after Sri Yukteswar's passing, he came to Yogananda in a physical body, and he reaffirmed these words, I will be with you always. We will conclude our evening with an arati and one more musical piece. You go first? I'm sorry. Excuse me. I got the order mixed up.
Love is all I know, sun rays on the snow of a winter long, in darkness without song. Oh, my heart's afire, burning all desire, only you remain in life again. Too long I did stray, flung lifetimes away, imagined you did not care. I know now your smile was mine all the while. I listened and love was there. I can't breathe for love. Oh, the stars above call to me, come home. Life's waves all end in foam. Only love can heal all the pain I feel. What a fool was I to turn away. Too long I did stray, flung lifetimes away, imagined you did not care. I know now your smile was mine all the while. I listened and love was there. I can't breathe for love. All the stars above call to me, come home. life's waves all lend and foam. Only love can heal all the pain I feel. What a fool was I to turn away.
Finiamo la serata con una preghiera insieme dove visualizziamo la luce del nostro Param Guru Swami Sri Yukteswar nell'occhio spirituale e chiediamo a lui di renderci canali di quella saggezza di cui il mondo ha tanto bisogno, perché attraverso la nostra preghiera quella luce possa toccare tutti i cuori. Swami Sri Yukteswar, tu sei onnipresente, sei in tutti i tuoi figli, manifesta la tua saggezza in ogni cuore. Swami Sri Yukteswar, thou art omnipresent, thou art in all thy children, manifest thy infinite wisdom in all hearts and souls. Om Shanti.